Morning. Good Sunday, sunny morning. It's appropriate that we can look out our window and have that wonderful sun. One of the great parts of New Mexico, as you all know. And so it's appropriate, especially after the annular eclipse yesterday, to comment about the sun and the benefits it brings to us. And the benefits that thanks to generous donations of a number of you, and especially a major donation by John and Mia McLeod, we have solar panels on our roof in a system that gives us almost all the electricity we need. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as I have 2 or 3, well, 5 or 6 slides to show you. I think that sun may have burned out our capacitors there. So today, I think we strive, certainly I strive, to live in harmony with Mother Earth, not something that we thought about so much when I was a kid, or even in my early adult years, but it's coming to be more and more important to us now. Next slide. Positive Energy Solar was our installer, our designer installer, and I guess I should say they've installed many of the solar panels around in Los Alamos. They did mine 13 years ago, and I see we have Joe Granville here, if you would stand. He is from Positive Energy Solar, and we want to thank you for the expert work that you all did. And especially for getting through all the myriad of permitting and so on that's required. Thank you, Joe. This is what they ended up placing on our roof. I think there's 40 panels, if I remember correctly, each about 400 watt panels. And that was on the 31st of May. They'd completed their work in about a week. It was really impressive to see about 8 people, 2 or 3 crews, all working on the electric and on the installation of the mechanical stuff and so on. Next slide. This is what it looked like just about at high noon on the 23rd of June. We had, on the right, you see our meter from our solar panels reading 00000, and you see down in the bottom circled the main switch, which we had the honor of opening, throwing it. Peg Dahl and I had the honor of starting that up at about noontime. And as we threw the switch, we get to the next meter. About 12 minutes later, the first 1 showed up on the meter. That was the first kilowatt hour supplied by our system. Next slide. This is kind of a look at, first of all, the yellow line at the top is our total kilowatt hour usage from January through September, into September. And the circled part was the 23rd of June when we plugged it in, and you can see the red line, which is the county, extending out from the yellow down to the bottom. That is the county's contribution, how much buying kilowatts we're getting from the county. And the blue line is what we're producing off of our roof. And right in the middle, those two are just about crossing, even though our system had only been on since the 23rd of June for like 7 days. It was already equaling the amount that the county provided in the first 23 days. And so right now we're running just a little bit below the grand total, which is about as was designed. for economic reasons and so on. Next slide. Down the bottom, well, about top right, we have in 4 months generated over 15,000 or let's say 15 megawatts of electricity. And at 11 cents a megawatt, it came out to about a little over $400 a month that we're saving at this point. And down the lower left is maybe, that's for our pocketbooks, but where it really counts, well, people would say their pocketbooks really count, but honest, in order to live and strive to live in sustainability, assuming that the county electricity is about 50% from fossil fuels now. I don't know the exact. I know it used to be 2/3, but that was 13 years ago. So I made that assumption, and even at that, we've saved almost 6 tons of CO2 up into the air. So next, to the end that all souls shall live in harmony with each and with all, and with Mother Earth, I might add. Thank you.
So I've been told leading everybody up on the roof to do this next part is a liability issue. So instead, we've already thrown the switch, as you can see, and it's done a lot of good. But we'll start this morning by just turning our lights on here in the sanctuary as a celebration of powering it ourselves. And would you all please now join me in a spirit of blessing. May this solar panel array capture the light flowing from our nearest star and transform it into energy that powers our church home, our sacred space for gathering, dreaming, learning, and loving. May this wonder of technology perch well and safely upon our roof in all weather for decades to come. May its presence here inspire others to explore and install clean, bright energy sources as we all do our parts to move our planet to a post-carbon era and live in harmony with the earth. And let the congregation say, shine on.
Shine on.
Amen. Welcome to the Unitarian Church of Los Alamos. I'm the Reverend John Cullinan, your minister here, As Unitarian Universalists, we affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of all people and gather together in a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Whoever you are, whomever you love, wherever you are at this moment, here or watching from home, wherever you are on your life's journey, you are welcome to be a part of this community. I want to extend a special welcome this morning to any visitors or first-time guests we have among us. I invite you to join us all for coffee and conversation after the service in the fellowship hall off here to your right. I would love to introduce myself, answer any questions you might have about our community here. New parents are encouraged to have a conversation with our Director of Lifespan Religious Education, Tina DeYoe, here. We have several options for our young members here at our young worshipers carpet space or at the intention table right behind it. And for our youngest, there is space in the nursery, and Sarah, our nursery coordinator, will be happy to check you in there. And now would you please take a moment to center yourselves for worship this morning. Feel yourself grounded where you sit. Feel the presence of the others around you. And take a deep breath as we breathe in the same air. And breathe out. And let us begin. As we gather this morning, let us be a people of not forgetting. Let us practice holding collective memories that might otherwise slip into that enormous void that sucks at and corrodes any future we hold dear. Let us practice honoring truth-telling up from the past that must come fully into the now, lest we falter and fail, lest the whole remain in pieces. Let not our need for comfort or simplicity, for easy forgiveness or false pardon, smother the heartbreak that still needs healing. Let us practice resilience with reckoning. Let us marry memory with promise. Let us dance in the tension we find there. Let us rest in the integrity we cultivate there. Let us be partners with this possibility that emerges there. It is good that we gather. So come, let us worship together on this beautiful morning. Would you all please rise in body or spirit and join in our opening hymn, number 21. remain standing and join in our affirmation. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve life in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow in harmony. Thus do we covenant with each and with all. Please be seated. Candles have been lit this morning for George Rose in the thoughts of the Rose and Orth family. He would have been 100 years old yesterday. And a candle for Susan Gisler and the Gisler family. Susan's mother passed away early Monday morning, and they are out in New York to be with family right now, and our thoughts and our prayers are with them. For all our joys, all our sorrows, whether we share them aloud with one another or we hold them close and quiet in our hearts, let us be together now in a moment of silence. Eternal and beloved, gracious source of all life and all love, we come together this morning grateful for this time out of time, which we have set apart so that we might become more fully present to ourselves, to each other, to our communities, to that which we call holy. May our joys be celebrated together, our wounds be healed together, and our hearts be opened together. Let the warmth and the welcome of this circle radiate among us and out into the community. May we be reminded of our calling to welcome in the stranger, to bind up the brokenhearted, to feed the hungry, to embrace the lonely. May we be reminded of our calling to be the hands of the Spirit, transforming the world as it is into the world as it could be. Let this place be the source of our courage and our strength, lifting our spirits and opening our hearts. May we carry the source of all life and all love with us through the week to come, until we can be in one another's presence again. All this we pray in the names of those known and unknown, present and absent, remembered and forgotten, in the names of all the helpers of humankind. Amen. I wonder this morning, has anyone sitting in this room or watching at home, have you ever broken your own heart? Have you ever done something, said something, thought something, had a moment where you feel the ouch for the others who could have been hurt by it? Where you feel like you just were for a moment not the person you knew you were or knew you wanted to be? How do you heal your own heart after moments like that? We can get wrapped up in that heartbreak very easily sometimes. We can get so far down on ourselves we can't find a way out of the pit that we can throw ourselves into. How do we heal our own hearts? How do we make amends when we're the victims of our own selves and our own imperfections? We start by being people of imagination. Imagine, what would it be like if it was better? If I was better? What would that look like, both inside myself and out in the world? And then once we've imagined that new thing, that better thing, we do the thing that makes us human. We imagine a future, we imagine something better, and then we take action. We do something, just one thing to start, something that will help make that better for ourselves, for the world around us. And as we're imagining and as we're acting, take some time for some introspection. We reflect on our own selves, on our heart, on our soul, on the way that our words and our actions have impact on our own selves and the world around us, and be thankful. Have some gratitude for what it is you do have within you that contributes to that turnaround, to that better world, to that better self. And then comes the hardest part. Forgive ourselves. And that doesn't mean we're just going to let ourselves off the hook for what we did and everything's okay and we're just starting from scratch again. We've thought about how things could be different and we've made an action towards that, and we've done some real inner reflecting about what gifts we do have that makes that transformation. And in order to get out of our own way, forgive. Set aside your frustration with yourself. That is the thing that often holds us back the most. It's the I can'ts. It's the I can't believe I did that. It's the I'll never be able to break through this. Let go of your frustration with yourself so that the things you know you do have and the things you know you can do can come forth. And we might cycle through all of that over and over again and back and forth and have trouble forgiving ourselves and have to go back to the imagining. But as we're going through that cycle, eventually what we get to is some sense of healing. A sense that we're returning to our engagement with ourselves and to the world with some real intention. We're doing it on purpose. We're imagining the better way, and we're acting towards it. And we're always looking inward to see how that work is going. find your heart isn't broken nearly as much as you thought it was. It's just more sort of a jigsaw puzzle. The pieces fit back together again. And our own hearts don't need to be broken for so long. In light of recent events, no Oreos will be allowed in the library. We have a saying in our house, every rule is named after somebody. There is always somebody and a story attached to them that leads to stuff like this. This is the Greg rule. We all know Greg can't avoid or resist Oreo-related mayhem, and so we have to set a boundary with him, and that remains up. And often the rule or the sign outlives the person. We forget what the story was behind why we can't have Oreos in the library. We forget that Greg plastered the entire magazine section with Oreos. We just know that this is how we do things here in the library. This is a library. Of course, we don't allow Oreos in here. Why would you need Oreos in the library? We don't know how we got there. It's just the way we do things. And over time, we lose context. Sometimes this is a natural process, and sometimes people want us to forget the story, to forget the names on purpose. sometimes people will want to just outright prevent us from telling the story, ban it outright. We will never tell these stories in this community again. This is kind of the shape of what happened in Florida last year with the Stop Woke bill, where we were no longer going to, in schools or in private businesses, allow stories to be told that might make people feel uncomfortable because of whatever race they might be. And of course, the rule is vague enough that nobody knew really what stories they could or could not tell, so they started just kind of lopping off every detail that might lean into telling a story of, say, the civil rights movement. And so all of a sudden, Rosa Parks just showed courage. One day she rode the bus. She was told to move to a different seat. She did not. She did what she believed was right. That's the story of Rosa Parks in Florida right now, which I gotta be honest, when you take race out of the whole equation there, it's a much more relatable story. I mean, I too, on many occasions, have been asked to get out of my seat and go somewhere else, and so I really identify with that now, and I can feel good about that. I need a sarcasm tag somewhere in the middle of these. When we forget the stories, that make us uncomfortable, that make us cringe a little bit, when we forget them or we're prevented from telling them, or we force them out of the conversation, what we do is start to create the illusion of a perfect past. Everything was fine back then. How things are right now are just the way things are, and they're working out pretty good for many of us. And now, all of a sudden, there's all this anger and all this desire for change from these people over here, and we don't understand, where is this all coming from? Everything was perfect. We did things the way we did things. They're trying to disrupt our way of life. Why would someone do this? Why would somebody want to cut off that part of the narrative in order to be able to separate out the us from the them so easily? One, because it lets a lot of us off the hook. It gives us free rein to not think about the things we do not want to think about. Which is why Stop Woke was presented as a way of preventing people from feeling guilty. Nobody likes to feel guilty. It's an awful feeling, so aren't you glad we're looking out for you? You don't have to feel guilt about things you want to think about. Two, it preserves the benefits of the system for the some who are benefiting from it. I mean, somebody's doing well by the way things work around here, the way we do things around here. Not for everybody, but we just said you're not allowed to talk about that anymore. It preserves the benefits for the some, and it preserves and it strengthens the power of those who have power in that system of the way we do things around here. It's no coincidence that reflecting back to a perfect past and telling stories about it is recognized as one of the steps on the pathway to authoritarianism, controlling the story we tell about who we are. But we know, at least I hope we know, that the story of a perfect past is a lie. We know that that perfection that gets talked about only applied to a few people, that it left a lot of others out in the cold. Sometimes that in and that out group shifts. When we forget the stories of our foibles, of our failures, of our less than stellar moments, when we ban those stories from being told, the stories of how we got here and why we do things the way we do, it means we can no longer reconcile with one another. We can't reconcile across the herd, across the haves and the have-nots, against the in-group and the out-group. We can't make the progress we might hope to have in building a beloved community, of widening that circle, that in-circle, ever wider and wider. And the longer we go without telling the stories, the deeper we bury them down into the muck where they can't be seen, the harder and harder it becomes over time to really do that work of healing, of reconciliation. Things get more and more entrenched. The way we do things around here becomes the way we do things around here. And the suffering without that continues. So what, John? What do we do about that? How do we make change in a system that wants to assuage guilt so we don't have to face things? How do we make a change so the whole story can be told, so we can build that community, so we can widen that circle? I think it starts with that notion of guilt that is built in to that system and that storytelling. I think we begin by dismantling the very popular and false narrative that when we tell these stories, guilt is the desired outcome. Because that's certainly the story we're being told. We do not tell the rougher stories of our history to feel guilty, to make anyone feel guilty. We tell them because we need to understand how we got here and what not to do, and how to do something differently, to imagine something better. Isabel Wilkerson, in her book Caste, writes the following: "We in the developed world are like homeowners who inherited a house on a piece of land that is beautiful on the outside, but whose soil is unstable, heaving and contracting over generations, cracks patched but deeper ruptures deferred for decades. Many people would rightly say, I had nothing to do with how this all started. I have nothing to do with the sins of the past. My ancestors never attacked indigenous people, never owned slaves. And yes, not one of us was here when the house was built. Our immediate ancestors may have had nothing to do with it, but here we are, current occupants of a property with stress cracks and bowed walls and fissures built into the foundation. We are the heirs to whatever is right or wrong with it. We did not erect the uneven pillars or the joists, but they are ours to deal with now. And any further deterioration is in our hands." When we hear the stories of the sins of our past, it helps to not think of them as our own personal problem. It's a generational problem. We're not being accused of anything, we're just being told how it is, the way things are, and how we do or don't do things around here. It's a communal exercise for us to understand what has come before. When we feel guilt in hearing those stories, I think it derives from what I like to call main character energy. We think we're the main character in the story, and when we hear the bad story, we think, oh no, you can't lay that on me. I had nothing to do with that. We're forgetting that this whole thing, this life, this world we're building, it's an ensemble piece. We each get our moments. None of us gets top billing. None of us is going to be the focus of the whole character arc through the whole thing. We tell those stories because we need to understand them to fix them. We tell the stories so we can imagine something different, so we can act in a way that works towards that different, that better, that gets us to a place where we can forgive ourselves for mistaking ourselves for the main character, for one thing, and for turning away from a problem that is ours to share. Our heritage, and that's our theme this month, the heritage, what we have inherited to get us who we are and where we are today, includes all of the mistakes and all of the failings of those who've come before, along with all of those triumphs and those great moments, all of those pioneers who have made us who we are. The shadow comes with the light, not because we're guilty of anything, but to put the jigsaw heart back together. It helps in this instance, then, to approach history with humility. And I say that knowing that there is a lot in our history, in our personal histories, in the history of our country, in the history of the world. There's a lot in that history that makes us feel proud to be who we are, that gives us a definite sense of pride, and well, it should. But again, we have to pull ourselves out of the center of understanding that story. The history of the world is not about me, though sometimes I like to think it does. The history of the world is about us, and not just us sitting here in this room, us around this world, us who all came before us, and us who are going to come after us, who are going to have to clean up whatever mess we've made along the way because we're just doing our best. We need to hear the stories with humility. When we approach history, even if it's happening right in front of us, even as we are participating in it, it makes a difference. Let me tell you a story from our history. In 1993, the Unitarian Universalist General Assembly was held in Charlotte, North Carolina, which was at the time the part of the UUA's Thomas Jefferson District, because Thomas Jefferson was a Unitarian. No, he wasn't. It was a major anniversary for Jefferson himself, and so they decided that the theme for the ball that they would hold towards the end of the gathering would be Thomas Jefferson, and everybody should come, if they're able to, in period costume to celebrate Jefferson and his achievements and his Unitarian connections. And this gave some folks pause. Black Unitarians in our numbers said, hey, wait a minute. What would our period costume be exactly? Hope Johnson, who was a lay leader in one of our New York congregations and later a very influential minister amongst us, asked the question out loud as they gathered a small delegation to speak at the microphone during a business session. Am I supposed to arrive in rags and chains? And you could hear a pin drop. It would be easy in that moment for everybody who had planned that ball, for everybody who celebrated the heritage that Thomas Jefferson gave to us, to immediately go on the defensive, to ignore the story they were being told, to push back. And while there was a instinct to do that in the moment, something interesting happened. The leaders of the General Assembly who've been planning things, and the folks who got up to speak to remind us that the history isn't all as bright and shiny as we think it is, got together. They stopped the meeting for an hour and said, let's work this out. Let's see if we can come to some kind of a solution. And they talked to one another. And they heard one another. And the outcome in that moment wasn't perfect, because nothing rarely is. What they decided was the ball would go on as planned, because money had been spent and yada, yada, yada. But the costume requirement would be shunted aside. You can if you want, but you don't have to. And most did not. And there was a little bit of protesting outside the ball. And afterwards, everyone stayed at the table. All those people who could have been at one another's throats became friends. Seriously, friends, lifelong friends. Two of them entered seminary together because in that moment they felt a call to do something in the movement. They imagined something better and they wanted to do it together on completely opposite sides of that moment. And a few years later, the UA as a whole passed a resolution to start really doing that inward reflecting I was talking about, to start looking at what it is in our history that might be on those shadow sides so that we can talk about them and deal with them and imagine something different when we understand them. And about 9 years later, the Thomas Jefferson District itself just became the Southeast District, not wanting to have the name attached anymore, knowing the whole story. I tell this story, one, as an example of what happens when we approach the passage of history with humility, either the stories that came before us or the stories we are telling right now. What happens when we get over our own little selves and just stay in the relationships together. And I tell the story because it is still a story that is told in Unitarian Universalist circles. It comes up and is celebrated time and again because it is part of the whole story of who we are as a religious people. It is part of the whole story of how we got here and why we do things the way we do them. It's part of the story about how we can do something better when we approach things with humility and honesty. Our heritage is the whole story. And we tell the darker parts of the story not to shame anyone, but to understand and to grow, so that we do not repeat the mistakes and the horrors of the past. So we build a world where it's harder to make those mistakes. The only shame in the telling of any of those stories comes in refusing to meet the whole story where it is, in refusing to hear it at all, and in failing to answer the challenge that it presents to all of us. It is a deep, deep profession of faith to be able to be a part of community and be able to tell the stories of triumph and the stories of failing, and to look at ourselves honestly and say, I love us, and I want us to be better. I love us and I want us to be better. There is no perfect past. But if we're facing everything with honesty and humility, the future has a little potential, I think. Maybe so. As we prepare to return to our everyday lives, it is time to give something of the gifts of this congregation back to the larger community we are part of. It is time for our offering. During the month of October, all cash and undesignated funds that we collect on Sunday mornings will be given to our friends at Tewa Women United in Rio County in support of their work with Native women, for Native women's health, and the new facility they are trying to build. You may give through the basket this morning or through your Givelify app, or drop an envelope in the collection box at the back of the sanctuary if you choose. The offering will now be accepted. May what you give bring you joy and into deeper relationship with this community. Freely have we given our gifts, gratefully have we received them. May the gifts we have given and received be our hands and our values in the world around us. Important announcements and upcoming events can be found on the back page of your order of service. through our announcements email list, in our monthly newsletter, on our Facebook page. Just 2 to highlight this morning. However, 1, Saturday, the 21st, this Saturday, 4 p.m., we will ordain our own Tina DeYoe into the Unitarian Universalist ministry. I hope you will all join us for this celebration and stick around for refreshments afterwards. And our annual Trunk or Treat event will take place on Sunday the 29th, starting at 4 p.m. This is a chance to have your kids parade around in their costumes and trick or treat from out of the trunks of the cars in the parking lot. And if you want to be one of the trunks and decorate all that up, show up around 3 o'clock to set up before the kids get there to ravenously, like locusts, descend upon the candy for the short amount of time it'll take to give it all away, I think, yes. See Tina if you want to, yes. All right. Would you all please rise in body or spirit once more and join in our closing hymn, number 128. Friends, may life bless us and keep us. May the light of life shine upon us and out from within us and be gracious to us and bring us peace. For this is the day. This is the one wild and precious life we have been given. So let us all find a way to rejoice and be glad in it. Go in peace.